The hush of twilight blanketed the suburban street as Orion's belt began to sparkle in the widening darkness above. Seth could hardly contain his excitement. He wiped his hands on a frayed cloth, smudging some leftover grease from the brand new tripod he had assembled only moments ago. He'd been waiting for this evening for weeks, waiting for the new moon to reveal the purest, darkest sky possible. Tonight, he would share a hidden world of stars and nebulae with neighbors who rarely lifted their eyes from the bustle of daily life. Though the word observatory might have been an exaggeration for what Seth was building, he liked to call it that. His makeshift observatory was simply his front yard, cleared of his mother's potted plants and carefully set up with a table of star charts, a few red flashlights, and his beloved telescope. The contraption was far from professional, a piecemeal assembly born of yard sale bargains and secondhand parts. His father's old aquarium tubes had been repurposed as dew shields, a battered car battery powered the mount, and a collapsible ladder served as an improvised viewpoint for tiny onlookers. None of that mattered. What mattered was the promise of exploration, the promise of wonder he hoped to share. He triple-checked the alignment of the telescope. Cassiopeia was perched in the sky like a sprawling wa, guiding him. His mother, Alicia, slipped quietly behind him and set down a tray of steaming cocoa cups. She was a busy woman, always juggling late shifts at the hospital, but whenever he had a star party in mind, she made time. "It's almost showtime," she said gently, gazing at the broad swath of stars overhead. "Do you think anyone will come?" Her voice was laced with both curiosity and residual motherly concern. Seth shrugged. "I hope so," he replied. "I dropped flyers on every doorstep on the block, and I told them to come prepared for a cosmic journey." He laughed nervously, remembering how he had hurried from mailbox to mailbox 2 evenings ago, complete with a cartoon rocket and swirling constellations. He had highlighted free hot cocoa, thinking maybe that would entice people even if the stargazing alone didn't. When Alicia returned inside to fetch more treats, Seth turned to the sky with a quiet prayer. Low on the eastern horizon, Jupiter shone fiercely like a diamond. He gently moved the telescope to frame the gas giant, aligning the planet in the eyepiece. He had tested it a few minutes earlier, and the swirling storm belts were eerily clear tonight. Soon, the neighbors would see the planet's 4 largest moons, dotting Jupiter's plane like guards around a king. It was exactly the kind of captivating view he hoped would spark both curiosity and conversation. A gentle squeak of sneakers on concrete made him glance down the dark street. A mother and daughter, Kayla and little Molly, from 2 houses over, appeared shyly by the mailbox. "Glad you could make it," Seth said, beaming as they approached. Kayla's eyes flicked to the telescope with timid excitement. She mentioned that Molly had never seen a real telescope before and was dying to look. "She's convinced she'll see aliens," Kayla joked, stroking Molly's soft hair. Seth crouched down to Molly's level, the chilly air brushing his cheeks. "Well," he said, "if we see any aliens, promise me you'll let me interview them." The girl giggled. Seth adored that laugh. With the gentle steps of a teacher, he guided the child to the telescope's eyepiece. "Now take a look. That bright light in the sky is Jupiter." Molly pressed her tiny eye to the opening, her hair brushing the lens. She froze, then let out a gasp so loud it vibrated in the stillness. "Mommy! Mommy! Come see! It's huge!" She sounded breathless, the squeal of pure delight echoing down the street. Seeing that reaction melted Seth's nerves. Pride bloomed in his chest. He covered a sudden lump in his throat by tinkering with the telescope's focus, adjusting the clarity. Kayla's whisper of awe as she looked too was worth the effort he'd put in. "I never imagined." "It's actually so close," she said, her voice hushed. Before they could switch to Saturn, more neighbors trickled in. Mr. Lang from across the street arrived, sporting a heavy coat and brandishing a thermos. He nodded politely at Seth before guiding his youngest granddaughter to the station, explaining that he'd loved astronomy as a boy but hadn't looked through a telescope in decades. Following him were the newlyweds from next door, Marisol and Arturo, who brought a tin of spice cookies. Soon, the quiet suburban street was aglow with pockets of conversation and laughter, elderly folks and small children alike crowding near. Alicia emerged with trays of cocoa in red paper cups. She handed them around, smiling at the joy radiating from each newcomer. Seth, flustered yet elated, bounced among the small clusters of people. He pointed at the constellations overhead, explaining how to locate Polaris using the Big Dipper, or how Orion's belt could lead the eyes to Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. His enthusiasm proved infectious. Even the self-proclaimed not star-savvy neighbors found themselves craning necks, mesmerized. A hush fell as Seth invited them to see Saturn's rings through the telescope. One by one, they peered in and gasped. The planet looked like a tiny jeweled earring suspended in blackness, its rings shimmering with faint golden hues. In the background, the ephemeral noise of traffic was replaced by soft exclamations of wonder. Some neighbors clasped their hands over their mouths, scarcely believing how small and fragile these worlds felt in that dark, infinite theater of space. As the star party continued, new arrivals kept surprising Seth. People he hadn't even realized lived nearby stopped by with homemade cookies, brownies, or sometimes just an appetite for discovery. The previously quiet suburban cul-de-sac resonated with conversation in multiple languages: English, Spanish, Tagalog, even some Polish from the Kowalskis at the end of the block. Though they were only gazing at the night sky, a sense of camaraderie swelled. People introduced themselves to neighbors they'd never spoken to before, forging fresh bonds under the cosmic canopy. Much to Seth's delight, even reclusive Mr. Hall dropped by, guiding his wheelchair along the sidewalk. He was a veteran who rarely ventured beyond his house. Neighbors had mostly seen him only through drawn curtains, yet here he was, smiling tentatively at the crowd. It took a moment of maneuvering to lower the telescope for him, but once Mr. Hall took a look at Jupiter, he was enthralled. "During the war," he said softly, "I used to watch the stars from remote places. Reminded me of home." The crowd fell respectfully silent, swirling in the depth of his memory. Then, with a small, grateful nod, Mr. Hall whispered, "Thank you for this," while the sky overhead turned darker and the Pleiades star cluster made an entrance on the horizon. The swirling dots overhead began to look denser, as though the night sky had spilled a handful of diamonds onto a velvet cloth. A group of curious kids gathered around Seth as he flipped through a battered old star atlas. They giggled as he explained the legends behind the constellations, how Cassiopeia was once punished for her vanity, or how Perseus rescued Andromeda from a sea monster. The children, enthralled by the romance and adventure, tugged on their parents' sleeves, trying to retell the stories in simplistic terms. In the midst of the starry excitement, a slight problem arose. 5 or 6 newcomers had to wait a long while just to get a quick peek through the telescope's lens. The line grew longer, and kids started hopping up and down to ward off the chill. Sensing the developing impatience, Kayla piped up with a spontaneous suggestion. "I have a pair of binoculars at home, maybe that can help keep folks engaged while they wait." Within minutes, a handful of neighbors dashed home and returned carrying binoculars and small telescopes they'd forgotten even existed in attic corners. Soon, what began as one solitary telescope in Seth's yard turned into a collective astronomy carnival. Groups formed around each new viewing station. Some folks aimed the binoculars at the moon's faint silhouette, catching a glimpse of crater outlines. Others discovered the Andromeda Galaxy, a hazy patch barely visible with the naked eye but appearing more pronounced through binoculars. Seth nearly leapt for joy when he heard one neighbor exclaim, "Wow, I didn't know we could see another galaxy from here." The spirit of curiosity and discovery was contagious. Meanwhile, Alicia pivoted a large speaker into the yard. She played soft, ambient music that complemented the stargazing rather than overpowering it. A gentle synth melody rose and fell like slow celestial orbits. Mr. Lang's granddaughter began to sway in playful dance. A small circle of children followed her lead, giggling with glee as they twirled under the starlight. Seth couldn't help but smile. He never imagined a simple star party could lead to an impromptu dance gathering, neighbors greeting each other with warm smiles and cocoa cups raised in toasts. Little by little, an electric sense of kinship grew. Even teenage siblings who usually stayed enshrouded in their phone screens were exclaiming over sightings of meteors that streaked quiet oosh and ahas drifted through the crisp night air each time a shooting star scratched a bright line across the sky. Some neighbors, like the budding photographer Marisol, began setting up tripods to snap long exposure shots. She marveled at how much of the Milky Way she could capture, even with the city's light pollution. Eventually, the conversation turned from stargazing to larger questions about the cosmos. Arturo, munching on spiced cookies, asked Seth, "Do you ever think about how tiny we are? I mean, look at all these stars." A hush spread around them as people perked up to listen. Seth nodded, taking a moment before responding. "All the time," he said. "Sometimes it's overwhelming to think about, but it also helps me remember that our squabbles and differences are so small compared to the vastness out there. I guess that's part of why I wanted to do this, to remind us we're all part of something bigger." Arturo patted his shoulder. He glanced around at the faces illuminated by porch lights, by starlight, by the subtle glow of wonder. "Well, you've certainly done that," he said. "Look around you." Seth did, and what he saw warmed him. Neighbors who had barely nodded to each other at the bus stop, now chatting like old friends. Families trading recipes as children rummaged around for more cookies. And once isolated neighbors stepping forward with stories of their own, star-filled memories. Alicia, leaning against the porch railing, admired the transformation. She couldn't recall the last time the block had felt so united, so alive. It was as if the normal world had dissolved, leaving only this shared curiosity bridging differences. The cozy hum of collaboration kept everyone transfixed, until they realized just how late it was getting. Kids rubbed sleepy eyes and parents glanced at watches. Even so, they lingered, hesitant to break the spell the stars had spun over them. As the night grew colder, the group began drifting into deeper conversations. Some couples found quiet corners, sipping cocoa while reflecting on childhood memories of stargazing with parents or grandparents. Others shared personal stories that had nothing to do with astronomy, yet felt intimately connected by the cosmic setting. The faint glow of the sky seemed to encourage a depth of trust, rarely seen in day-to-day interactions. Midnight approached, and houses dimmed one by one to conserve energy, but small clusters of humming discussion persisted. Seth realized he was exhausted, yet too exhilarated to sleep. He had to tear himself away from swirling astronomy debates about black holes and dark matter to greet new faces or help a child focus binoculars on the star cluster overhead. He was thrilled by the swirl of it all, by how everyone pitched in to keep the vibe going. Eventually, families trickled away. Some parted with heartfelt thanks, promising to return for the next star party. The children, in thick pajamas, gave enthusiastic waves, resisting parents' gentle pulls toward bedtime. Mr. Hall left last among the older folks, escorted by Marisol and Arturo back to his front door. He offered a salute to Seth, murmuring words of gratitude that stayed locked inside a tight throat. Seth waved back, moved by how a simple act of invitation had begun to tear down the quiet walls that had separated neighbors for so long. At last, only a small group remained, including Kayla and her daughter Molly, who had fallen asleep in Kayla's arms. Softly, Kayla thanked Seth. "It's been a rough year," she said, eyes drifting to the half-moon shape in the sky. "I've felt lonely. I never thought a night out on the street, looking at stars, would bring me closer to people around here. Thank you for that." Seth actually blushed upon hearing her sincerity. He decided to show her his favorite last treat, a look at the Orion Nebula starting to rise in the east. Carefully lining it up in the scope, he gestured for Kayla to look. In the eyepiece, a shimmering cloud of cosmic dust and gas revealed itself, faint but undeniably breathtaking. "It's a stellar nursery," Seth whispered as Kayla gasped. "One day, stars form there, new suns with new planets. It's kind of like new beginnings, in a way." That's beautiful," Kayla said. She glanced at Molly's sleeping face. "Who'd have imagined all that up there?" Seth folded the tripod a bit, wanting to preserve the memory. An ache of satisfaction filled him. Tonight, he had done more than feed his own fascination. He had ignited wonder in others, and in turn, discovered the spark of human connection. In the stillness that followed, Seth realized Alicia was collecting cups, quietly straightening folding chairs and tables. Need help, Mom? He asked, stepping toward her. She passed him a grateful smile, tossing the used cups into a recycling bin. The festivities had left a pleasant mess. Booker crumbs, scattered star maps, cocoa dribbles. Even the speaker still faintly played cosmic melodies as though refusing to let the night end. One by one, the small group bid each other good night, exchanging warm hugs and parting with promises to gather again soon, maybe next month, maybe for a meteor shower. Just let us know the date, Kayla said with excitement in her eyes, and Seth nodded. When their front door finally closed behind the last neighbor, Seth let out a long exhale. He was left with an invigorating sense of accomplishment, laced with a subtle longing for more nights like this one. He slipped off his jacket, stepping into the warmth of his home. Alicia followed, resting a gentle hand on his back as they surveyed the leftover paraphernalia. That was amazing, honey, she said. I'm so proud of you. Look how many people you brought together. Maybe we should make it a tradition. He rubbed his arm, still feeling the lingering chill of the night air. Yeah, he whispered, an almost childlike smile on his face. I think I'd like that. They spent the next hour tidying up. Seth carefully dismantled the telescope, stowing the lens protectors. He smiled as he saw a child's scribbled star map left behind. Some of the lines were crooked, the labeled constellations misspelled, but the exuberance was unmistakable. He tucked it into a drawer, deciding to keep it as a memento of the night. It was well past 1 in the morning when the two finally sank onto the couch. Alicia massaged her tired feet. The house was silent now, but outside, the faint echo of the star party still shimmered in the quiet street. Seth felt no regret about how many flyers he'd printed, how many hours he'd spent coaxing the battered telescope back to working condition, or how many times he'd rehearsed what to say. In the end, all of it had been worth it. He remembered Kayla's words, I never thought a night out on the street would bring me closer to people around here. She'd been right. Seth had seen the power of shared awe, the magic that occurs when people experience wonder together. And maybe that was the real gift of astronomy, not just glimpsing distant worlds, but bridging the gaps between us on this one. Eventually, Seth rose, noticing that Alicia had drifted off. He draped a blanket over her and tiptoed outside. The streetlights still glowed softly, but here and there, houses were dark. He lingered in the yard, automatically tilting his gaze to the sky. The suburbs might not have been the best place for seeing the Milky Way, but it was home. In that moment, it felt as though he could see more stars than ever before. He took it as a sign that for all the barriers people put up, for all the veneer of disconnection, there was still a capacity for unity. And sometimes that unity just needed a spark. He peered again at Orion, now standing tall, proclaiming the night. He pictured the swirling mists of dust and gas in the nebula, the hot young stars forming, and the endless chain of creation. A wave of gratitude roiled in his chest. So much existed out there, so much to discover, so much to learn, so much that connected them all. In that expanse, he saw a reflection of the very street he now called home. He felt the breeze pick up, shimmering across the branches. A piece of confetti from the star charts danced around his feet. He bent to pick it up, feeling the crisp texture run between his fingertips. An odd wave of warmth filled him as he recalled the squeals of children, the quiet thanks from neighbors, the swirl of sugary aromas, the hush of cosmic reverence. It was as if that night had woven their shared experiences into a tapestry that would linger even after the morning sun rose and drowned out the stars. This was what he had always found so profound about stargazing. In looking up, people could see beyond their own stories, glimpse something universal. And in that moment, the differences that kept them apart, language, background, personal struggles, began to melt away under the starlight. Each person, no matter their age, job, or personal burdens, could claim a small corner of the sky. Standing there, he resolved to do more. Perhaps next time, He'd plan a meteor shower watch party, or maybe an eclipse viewing, if the celestial calendar permitted. He imagined how much bigger the group might get, how many more neighbors would come out with curiosity in their eyes and open hearts. He pictured them leaning together, heads bumping as they gazed up in unison with childlike fascination. Yes, there would be plenty more nights of cosmic wonder to share. Heading back inside, he carefully locked the door. In tomorrow's daylight, everything might look ordinary again. The same street, the same houses, the same routine. But he knew better now. A new seed of community had been planted. It could grow into something beautiful if nurtured with continued kindness, shared stories, and yes, more star parties. Friends who had once been strangers would remember that sense of unity, that intangible bond formed under the silent watch of distant suns. With that comforting thought in mind, Seth finally climbed the stairs to his room. He sank onto his bed, gazing at the faint glow in the dark stars he'd plastered across his ceiling when he was younger. Even they seemed to shine a little brighter tonight. And as he closed his eyes, he quietly thanked the sky for making him an astronomer at heart, an ordinary kid with an extraordinary dream of bringing people closer together through the timeless wonder of the cosmos. When he dreamed, he saw the street again, filled with neighbors, smiling faces tilted upwards, hot cocoa in their hands. In that dream, the neighborhood glowed under a sky strewn with countless stars, each star a point of connection in a web that stretched across the entire universe. And at the center of that web, the humble block he called home, shining just as bright,